The sun rose above the quiet village, casting a warm, golden light over the lush fields. In this peaceful place lived John, a strong and kind-hearted widower who had experienced both the joys and sorrows of life. John's greatest pride was his son, Ishmael, a bright, lively boy who filled their days with laughter and energy. John is a highly successful farmer and a deeply respected person in his village. Loved and admired by all, he is known for his determined dedication and hard work on his farm. His son, Ishmael, is always by his side, eagerly assisting his father and learning from him. John's pride in Ishmael is massive. After Ishmael's mother died of illness, John decided not to take another wife. But as seasons passed, whispers grew among the villagers, wondering if John might remarry. A boy needs a mother's touch, the village elders would say. John, however, remained steadfast, believing the bond between him and his son was enough to keep them both strong. Eventually, after some consideration, John decided to take a wife, Rose, a woman from a neighboring village. Rose was graceful and strong, her beauty matched only by her sharp mind. She brought laughter and warmth into John's home, and soon after their marriage, she bore him a daughter, a small, delicate baby they named Adana, meaning daughter of the father. As the baby grew, the villagers celebrated, bringing gifts and blessings for the child. John's home was full of joy and laughter, but in the shadows, something darker began to take root. Rose adored her daughter Adana more than anything. She imagined a prosperous future for her, where Adana would live comfortably, her life filled with all the beauty the world could offer. However, there was one obstacle in her way: Ishmael, John's son, and the rightful heir to all that John owned. In the village, a tradition was strong. It dictated that the firstborn would inherit everything upon the father's passing. Rose knew this well. No matter how much wealth John accumulated, it would go to Ishmael when her husband died, not to her beloved Adana. This knowledge chewed at her, making her feel a strange discomfort every time Ishmael entered the room. As time passed, Rose's love for Ishmael began to fade. At first, it was gentle, her gaze growing colder whenever she looked at him, her voice a little sharper than it used to be. But soon, it turned to irritation and bitterness. Rose began to assign him all the duties she could think of, treating him like a servant rather than her stepson. She watched him work under the sun, his hands growing rough, and a strange satisfaction grew within her. Ishmael, once the joy of their household, now found himself increasingly lonely. When he came inside after a long day in the fields, his back aching and his hands sore, he would expect the warmth of home, a kind word from Rose, or even a smile. Instead, Rose would look at him with barely concealed hatred. "You missed a spot," she would say, her tone disrespectful, sending him back out to do the task again. Her actions were wounded more deeply than words ever could. Ishmael tried to understand why his stepmother's behavior had changed so drastically, wondering if he'd done something wrong. He began to question himself, doubting his own worth and wondering if he belonged in his own home. Yet, ever the cheerful person, Ishmael continued to hope that one day, Rose would look at him with kindness again. When Ishmael offered to help with something, Rose would snap, "I didn't ask for your help. Go do something useful." She began to make him feel like an intruder in his own home, as if he were nothing more than a servant who had overstayed his welcome. At night, when they sat together for meals, Rose would place a special meal in front of Adana, as though she were the queen of the house, while Ishmael was given only the scraps. John, often caught up in his work, failed to notice the growing distance between them. He would praise Rose for how well she took care of the house and the children, blissfully unaware of the cruel treatment Ishmael was enduring. Ishmael, ever the optimist, tried to please Rose, thinking that if he worked harder, she would come to appreciate him. But the harder he worked, the colder her attitude became worse. Her smile had become an exceptional thing, a memory he could barely recall. And when he made a mistake, even a small one, Rose's punishment was rapid and harsh. "How many times do I have to tell you?" she would warn, her words biting. You're a disgrace to this household." Ishmael, who had once been full of joy and laughter, now found himself shrinking under her gaze. He told himself that she would come to love him one day, but deep down, he knew something had changed. Rose had grown to view him not as her stepson, but as a threat to her daughter's future. Every task he completed, every effort he made, seemed to make no difference to her. Ishmael would often stand at the edge of the village, looking at the other children playing together, wondering why he could not be a part of that world. Why did I feel like I had to earn a place in my own family? Why did I have to work so hard just to be seen? Rose's treatment of him was not just physical, it was emotional and psychological. She would make cruel comments about his appearance, his work ethic, and his every move. "Why do you walk like that?" Like a common laborer, she once mocked him, as though his very existence was a constant irritation to her. Her bitterness was only directed at Ishmael. She felt angry that he had John's love and attention, that he was the one who would inherit everything one day. She hated him for being alive, for being the heir, for being the son of the man she loved. Years pass. Adana starts to turn into a young woman, and Rose's frustration turns into desperation. She wanted her daughter to inherit everything, to have security and power. Her mind began to wander to dark places, contemplating how life would be if Ishmael were absent. The thoughts worried her at first, but gradually they took root, like weeds in a garden. She had been careful to hide her emotions from John, but the coldness in her eyes when she looked at Ishmael spoke volumes. One night, as Rose lay beside John, staring at the ceiling, her mind swirled. "It's for Adana's future," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding. She thought of the inheritance and how she could secure her daughter's life. But even as she spoke those words, they felt empty. She was no longer sure what was guiding her, love or the dark thirst for power. Her thoughts continued to twist until one day, she made a decision. She would act, and she would do so with cold precision. Rose prepared the traditional poison root, a substance known to be lethal yet nearly undetectable. With a pounding heart and shaking hands, she prepared a simple dish laced with the poison. Her heart thumped wildly as she called out to Ishmael. "Ishmael," she called, her voice steady, yet her palms clammy. "Come and eat. You have worked so hard today." But fate had other plans. Just as she placed the poisoned meal on the table, little Adana walked into the room, reaching up with eager hands. Before Rose could react, her beloved daughter had taken a large bite. "No!" Rose cried out, rushing to stop her, but it was too late. Adana looked up, her innocent eyes blinking in confusion, her small mouth tasting the food that would become her undoing. Panic seized Rose, and at that moment, she was consumed with horror. She had tried to poison an innocent boy, and now her own daughter, the light of her life, was suffering from her jealousy. Rose held her daughter in her arms as the child's breathing grew shallow. She screamed, "Ishmael has killed my daughter." John, who rushed in, shocked at the sight of his daughter lying weak and unresponsive. They tried everything they could, summoning the village healer, but Adana slipped away as the sun set, taking Rose's dreams with her. She told everyone in the village that Ishmael was the one who killed her daughter. In the days that followed, the villagers gathered to mourn, unaware of the truth, whispering among themselves. "Ishmael is a good boy. How could he kill his stepsister?" Ishmael, too, felt a deep sorrow, but was confused by his stepmother's accusation and strange behavior. He had always felt a distance between them, but now it felt as if there was an even greater split, one that neither of them could cross. The death of Adana sent shockwaves through the village, leaving John grief-stricken. As he struggled to comprehend the tragedy, Ishmael's involvement in her death left him questioning everything. But the sorrow was heavy, and the loss of his daughter left a hole that seemed impossible to fill. Days passed, and the villagers murmured, and John's heart had grown colder. He could not let go of the sense that something was wrong. The manner of his daughter's death felt unnatural to him. He had seen the sickness in her eyes, the way she had faded so quickly after the meal, and something bit at him, telling him that the truth was not yet fully known. In his misery, John turned to the village oracle, the mysterious woman who was said to speak with the spirits. He knew that she held the key to truths that were hidden from mortal eyes. The oracle lived at the edge of the village, in a small hut draped in beads and symbols of the ancient gods. When John arrived, she was sitting cross-legged, her eyes closed as she whispered a prayer, her hands resting on the earth. "Oracle," John said, his voice trembling. "My daughter is dead, and my wife is accusing my son that he killed her sister. I cannot live with the thought that her death was nothing. Please, tell me who did this. Who killed my little girl?" The oracle opened her eyes, her gaze piercing through John. "I will speak to the spirits, but be warned, John, truths spoken are not always gentle." John nodded, willing to hear whatever the oracle had to say, his heart already bracing for the blow. She closed her eyes again, muttering words under her breath. Her hands began to move slowly, as though weaving an invisible thread in the air, and the world seemed to quiet around her. Moments passed. The oracle spoke. "The spirit has spoken to me, but I will tell you the truth in front of all the people in the village. Tomorrow morning bring your wife and your son to the village square." Without any question, John agrees. The next day the village square was filled with curious villagers. Tuned, his wife and his son are standing in the middle. The village oracle started to speak. "The spirit of your daughter is here, and she speaks clearly to me. It was poison, the poison of a native root known to cause death quickly. But the poison was not meant for her. The one who gave it was her own mother. She plotted to end the life of your son, Ishmael, to take his inheritance for her daughter." A murmur swept through the gathering villagers. Gasps of disbelief rippled through the people, but John's heart froze in horror. Rose had killed his daughter? How could it be? His mind raced, but there was no denying the oracle's words. The village healer had already confirmed that Adana had died of poisoning, but no one had known the poison source until now. John's hands clenched into fists, his body trembling with anger, sorrow, and disbelief. He had loved Rose. He had believed in her. And now, the woman he had trusted had taken the life of his daughter. The villagers gathered in the square as word spread. The elders arrived, and soon, Rose was brought forth, her once beautiful face pale and haunted. Her eyes were bloodshot, her body slumped in defeat. She had been called before the entire village to face her crime. The elders stepped forward, and the chief elder, Pa Osman, spoke loudly for all to hear. "Rose, the spirits have spoken, and they have made it clear that you are guilty of the death of your own child. The poison was meant for Ishmael." The air was thick with tension. Rose's hands were trembling, and her face was drawn with guilt. For a moment, she said nothing, but the weight of the villagers' stares was too much for her to bear. The truth was hanging in the air, suffocating her. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking, I never meant for Adana to die. I only wanted a better future for her. I thought I could secure everything for her, that she deserved it more than Ishmael. I couldn't bear the thought of him inheriting what was mine." She dropped to her knees, sobbing. "I was blinded by greed, by jealousy. I wanted to give my daughter a future, but in the end, I destroyed everything. I've lost my daughter." The villagers were silent, watching as Rose's tears fell onto the ground. There was no sympathy in their eyes, only judgment. The wise elder Pa Osman raised her hand and spoke. "Your actions have brought tragedy to this land. You wanted to take what did not belong to you, and in doing so, you destroyed your family. For the suffering you have caused, for the poison you gave, there is only one fate for you. You are banished from this village. You will leave now and never return. Your heart, consumed by envy, has no place here. Go, and may the spirits guide you, for no man or woman can erase the burden you carry." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some of the villagers turned away, unable to bear the scene before them. Others shook their heads, still unable to comprehend the horror of what had been done. Rose stood up slowly, her movements robotic, as she turned to walk away from the village that had once welcomed her. As she crossed the threshold, leaving behind her home and the man she had married, she felt an overwhelming emptiness. She had traded everything, her daughter's life, her marriage, her community, for the temporary shadow of power. John watched her go, the pain of his loss still sharp in his chest. But for the first time, he felt a sense of finality. His daughter, though lost, had been avenged. And Ishmael, his son, would inherit the land. The legacy of John's family would continue, but it would be a legacy built on love, not on envy.
The story teaches that envy and greed can destroy families, leading only to sorrow and regret. True wealth lies in love, integrity, and the unity of family. If you enjoy this story, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support motivates me to bring you more amazing stories. Thanks for watching.